Okay, so we have one more pseudo class to discuss, which is called active. And I saved this one for last, not because it's my favorite. It is definitely not to hate on it too much. That was a little harsher than I meant. But because it's confusing, or it can be confusing, especially when you compare it to something like hover, which is very clear-cut. There's not much ambiguity around what it means to hover over an element. That is a clear state. But in my experience, students have often kind of gotten tripped up on the distinction between focus and active. And it's not really helped by the MDN descriptions, or at least not up front. So if we take a look at the description for active, well, first here's my kind of distilled version. Triggers when an element is being activated by user, in quotes. It's coming straight from the docs. That is not my language. But what does that really mean? Being activated by user versus receiving focus. And if we actually go to the docs, it doesn't clear it up that well up front. If we look at active, it's generally triggered when the user clicks on an element or selects it with the keyboard's tab key. And if we go back to focus, it is generally triggered when the user clicks or taps on an element or selects it with the keyboard's tab key. So those sound very similar. They are very similar, but they're different. They're different pseudo classes, and they apply to different states. So to really help understand this, I think it will help actually just to dive into CodePen and to just write some code to illustrate it. All right, so a good place to start, a very common scenario, is actually using buttons alongside the active pseudo class. So we'll do that ourselves, and by the end of this, we'll have 3 different states, all on this one button, or any button on this page technically. We just happen to have one. We have hover, we have focus, and we have active, or we will have active. So let's start with that, button : active. Just a small note, if you add a space here, it really breaks the entire thing. So if you're having trouble at home, that can be, it's a pretty common thing that I've run into. So button active, let's make it very clear. Let's make it orange. Just like that. And let's increase the font size to be 30 pixels. I'm actually not sure what it currently is at. That might be a much too big of a number, but it's fine. We're not really worried about that. All right, so let's trigger this. So just to refresh your memory, we've got hover, I've got focus, but now when I actually click on something, I don't know if that showed up in the video very well. I just did a quick click. We got a very brief view of our big orange button. And if I actually want to see it, I need to click and hold. So while I am clicking on this button, it is active. So again, we've got hover, and then I click, and I briefly get active, but then I released, so it went back to focus. It currently has the focus of the page. And then I could hold down, and actually right now I have both active and hover at the same time. You'll notice that the click me is white, which is not specified in active. It's specified in the hover pseudo class, or the selector corresponding to that. So I have 2 states at once, and I can release, and I still have 2 states at once. This time I have focus and hover. Now I just have focus. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense. I know it's kind of annoying to go over all of those. Let's make it a bit clearer though. Active is not a state that only applies to buttons. So let's do it to our paragraph active, and let's just make it yellow. All right, so I hover over it, nothing happens. Tab key, nothing happens, because I cannot have a focus or a focused paragraph. Focus only applies to inputs and buttons and text areas, but I can click on this paragraph and turn it yellow by making it active. Well, not this yellow. That is a bad coincidence. This yellow here. There we go. And I could do the same thing. Let's also do it to all H1s. So I'll just use both of them, separate them by commas. Active H1s, active paragraphs should both turn yellow. So it's not active, now it is. And same down here. Okay, so that mostly wraps up what I wanted to discuss around these 3 pseudo classes. Hopefully that helps you see the distinction between active and focus. Focus is a state that can persist. It's sort of the idea of clicking into something, traditionally at least, or something having focus. It maintains focus whether you are interacting with it at that moment or not. For example, that input has focus right now, or this button now has focus. Active is a more immediate state. It has to do, there that yellow is again, it has to do with clicking on or tapping on something in that moment. All right, so those are the 3 pseudo classes I wanted to talk about. The next thing we'll do is actually build something using them. It's not going to be mind-blowing, but it's a pretty nice looking button that has 3 different states, or actually 4 if you include the base state. So we'll use these 3 pseudo classes in conjunction to style one button, make it look good, hopefully. All right, that's coming up.